There are sounds you never forget. The hum of fluorescent lights in an underground corridor, the mechanical breath of air filtration systems pushing sterile air through concrete veins, the slow drip of condensation on steel doors that never see sunlight. My name is Marcus Webb. For 3 years, I worked as a security officer at a biological research facility in the Cascade Range of Washington State, a place that doesn't exist on any map, funded by agencies that don't appear in any budget. I signed documents that could put me in federal prison for the rest of my life. I wore a badge with no insignia. I guarded things the world wasn't ready to know existed. I thought I had seen everything. Tissue samples from unidentified species, skeletal remains that defied taxonomic classification, footage that made paleontologists weep and then sign their own NDAs. But nothing prepared me for Specimen 7. Nothing prepared me for the moment I realized that the thing behind the reinforced glass wasn't a thing at all, but someone. And nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the sound it made the night I decided my career was worth less than its freedom. This is what happened in the 48 hours that changed everything. The facility sat beneath 300 feet of basalt and pine forest, accessed through what appeared to be a USGS geological survey station. Above ground, government vehicles, scientific equipment, the occasional forestry student doing legitimate soil samples. Below ground, something else entirely. My shift ran from 2200 to 0600, the graveyard watch they called it. 8 hours of monitoring biometric sensors, checking containment protocols, ensuring that nothing in the sublevels ever reached the surface. The pay was exceptional. The silence was absolute. The questions we weren't allowed to ask were infinite. I had been assigned to D-Wing for 6 months when they brought in Specimen 7. The transport happened at night, naturally. I watched from Security Station 4 as a convoy of unmarked vehicles arrived. Not the standard refrigerated trucks used for tissue samples, but something larger. A modified cargo container with its own climate control, its own power supply, its own medical monitoring system. Dr. Sarah Chen, the facility's lead cryptobiologist, supervised the transfer personally. I had never seen her leave her lab after midnight. That alone told me this was different. "Officer Webb," she said, her voice flat with exhaustion, "you'll be assigned primary security for Containment Room 7, effective immediately. Protocols are being uploaded to your station now." "What's the specimen classification?" I asked, following procedure. She paused at the elevator, her security card already pressed to the reader. "Unclassified hominid, possibly Gigantopithecus descendant. Possibly something we don't have language for yet." The elevator doors closed before I could respond. Containment Room 7 occupied the eastern corner of D-Wing, separated from the main corridor by 3 security checkpoints and a double airlock system. The viewing station was designed for observation, not interaction. Reinforced glass 2 inches thick, audio monitoring, thermal imaging, the full suite. The first time I saw it, I understood why Dr. Chen looked so tired. It sat in the corner of the containment space which had been furnished to simulate natural habitat. Douglas fir branches, river stones, moss transplanted from the capture site. The creature itself was enormous, easily 8 feet tall even in its seated position. Dark auburn hair covered most of its body, thicker around the shoulders and spine. Its hands, God, its hands were almost human. Long fingers, opposable thumbs, nails not claws. But it was the face that stopped me. The slope of the brow, the deep-set eyes, the structure of the jaw. It was simian, yes, but there was something else. Something that looked back at you with recognition, with awareness. It hadn't moved since I began my shift. Just sat there, massive shoulders rising and falling with each breath, staring at the wall. Specimen 7 was captured 6 days ago in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. The automated briefing file explained through my headset. Adult male. Estimated age 30 to 40 years based on dental analysis. Captured following a series of livestock disturbances and 1 unconfirmed human encounter. Subject has shown no aggressive behavior since containment. Nutritional intake, minimal. Vocalization, none. Security protocol, observe only. Do not attempt communication. I watched it for 8 hours that first night. It never looked at me. Never acknowledged the cameras, the lights, the humans moving beyond the glass. It simply sat, breathing, existing in a space that was nothing like the forest it came from. At 600, when my relief arrived, I walked out into the pre-dawn darkness above ground and realized my hands were shaking. I didn't know why yet. The routine established itself quickly. Every night at 2200, I descended into the facility. Every night I took my position at Security Station D7. And every night for 8 hours, I watched a creature that shouldn't exist sit in a room designed to prove that it did. Dr. Chen's team worked with clinical precision. Daily health assessments conducted through remote sensors. Nutritional supplements introduced through automated feeding systems. Behavioral observations recorded and cataloged. Everything done at a distance. Everything designed to minimize stress on the subject. But Specimen 7 wasn't eating. Weight loss of 14 pounds over 10 days. I heard Dr. Chen tell her supervisor during a shift change. It's drinking water but refusing all food offerings, fruit, vegetation, protein sources. We've tried replicating its natural diet based on habitat analysis. Nothing. Increase the caloric density of the supplements, the supervisor responded. We didn't invest this much to lose it to starvation. It's not a metabolic issue, Dr. Chen said quietly. It's refusing to eat. I understood what she wasn't saying. The creature wasn't sick. It was making a choice. On my 12th night, something changed. I was reviewing thermal scans when I noticed the temperature differential. Specimen 7 had moved. Not much, just a shift from its usual corner position to the center of the containment space. It sat there directly under the primary camera, and for the first time since its arrival, it looked up. Not at the camera. At me. The glass was one way. It shouldn't have been able to see me through the observation window. But those eyes, dark, deep-set, impossibly intelligent, locked onto exactly where I was sitting. My breath caught. We stayed like that for 3 minutes. Me in my chair, finger hovering over the incident report button. It on the floor of its cell, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Then it did something I will never forget. It raised one massive hand, slowly, deliberately, and placed it flat against the glass. Not aggressive, not threatening, just reaching. I pulled back instinctively, my chair rolling backward into the console. The creature didn't move, didn't drop its hand, just waited, palm pressed against the barrier between us, as if testing whether I was real. Jesus Christ, I whispered. The motion sensor alarm tripped, and Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the intercom. Officer Webb, report. What's happening in 7? I stared at the creature. It stared back. Nothing, doctor. I lied. Specimen moved position, returning to baseline now. But it didn't return to baseline. It stayed there, hand against the glass, for another 20 minutes. And when it finally lowered its arm and retreated to its corner, I saw something in its posture that I had been trained specifically not to see. Resignation. The next morning I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I went to the facility library, a glorified server room with archived field reports, and I pulled the capture documentation. Specimen 7 had been tranquilized near a creek bed, 40 miles from the nearest logging road. The report noted signs of extended territorial residence and evidence of tool use, stacked stones, modified branches. There had been vocalizations during the capture described as distress calls, possibly communicative in nature, and then, buried in the field notes, a single line from the tracking team. Subject appeared to be traveling with juvenile. Secondary target evaded capture. I read that line 5 times. Then I closed the file and returned to my post, knowing that everything had changed. It happened on day 16. I had started arriving early for my shifts, a habit that earned me nothing but quiet nods from the day security team. I told myself it was professionalism, but the truth was simpler and more troubling. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd read in that field report. Subject appeared to be traveling with juvenile. That night I settled into my station at 21:45, 15 minutes ahead of schedule. The containment room monitors showed Specimen 7 in its usual position. Corner, back against the wall, knees drawn up in a posture that would have looked almost human if it weren't so large. The facility was quieter than usual. Dr. Chen's team had left early, their research hours curtailed by budget meetings in Seattle. Only essential staff remained. Myself, 2 other security officers in distant wings, and the automated systems that kept the building breathing. At 23:20, I heard it. At first, I thought something was wrong with the audio feed, a malfunction in the monitoring system, interference from the ventilation. But when I checked the diagnostics, everything registered normal. The sound was coming from containment room 7. I isolated the audio channel and increased the volume. It was vocalization. Low, rhythmic, resonant, not random, There was pattern to it, structure. The pitch would rise and fall, pause, then resume with slight variation. Like speech, but in a register and cadence no human throat could produce. And then I realized, it wasn't just sound, it was song. I sat frozen, headphones pressed to my ears, listening to something that shouldn't be possible. The creature was singing, or mourning, or calling. Each phrase seemed to echo with longing, each pause heavy with waiting for a response that never came. I pulled up the visual feed. Specimen 7 sat facing the corner, its massive back rising and falling with each vocalization. One hand was pressed flat against the concrete wall, fingers spread wide. The gesture was unmistakable. It was reaching for something that wasn't there. The singing continued for 7 minutes. Then slowly it shifted, the tone deepening, the rhythm breaking into something more fragmented, more desperate. And then came the sound that ended my career. A sob. Not human, not animal. Something between. Something that carried the weight of intelligence meeting grief. The creature's shoulders shook. Its hand slid down the wall, and from deep in its chest came a sound of such profound sorrow that I felt it in my own sternum. I was watching someone cry, not something, someone. My hand moved to the intercom button before I could stop myself. "Hey," I said, voice barely above a whisper. The crying stopped instantly. Specimen 7 turned, its massive body moving with surprising speed. Those dark eyes found me again through the glass, and this time there was no mistaking it. Recognition, awareness, and something else. Hope. "I'm sorry," I said, knowing it could hear me through the one-way audio system. "I'm so sorry." It moved closer to the glass, each step careful, measured. When it reached the barrier, it pressed both hands against it, not aggressive, not demanding, pleading. I stood up, my chair clattering backward, my heart hammered against my ribs. The creature tilted its head, watching me, waiting. And in that moment I understood something the PhDs with their doctorates and their clinical detachment had missed. This wasn't a specimen. This was a father, calling for his child. And we had taken him from everything he knew. I didn't sleep that day. I went through the motions, drove home to my apartment in Olympia, showered, made coffee I didn't drink. But I couldn't silence what I'd heard. That sound, that voice, breaking with grief in a language I couldn't understand but felt in every bone. At 1400, I did something that could cost me everything. I returned to the facility. "Forgot my thermos," I told the day shift officer, flashing my badge. He waved me through without interest. The facility library was empty. I had maybe 20 minutes before someone noticed an off-duty security officer accessing restricted archives. I used every second. I pulled up everything. Capture footage, GPS coordinates, field team communications, preliminary biological analyses. The pieces came together like a case file I never wanted to solve. Specimen 7 had been tracked for 3 weeks before capture. Trail cameras had recorded it moving through a consistent territory, roughly 8 square miles of old-growth forest near Dark Divide. The behavioral patterns indicated established residents, a shelter site, water sources, foraging routes, and in 4 separate photographs partially obscured by vegetation, a smaller figure. Juvenile, estimated 4 feet tall, moving in parallel to the adult. The capture had been planned for maximum efficiency. Tranquilizer darts, 3-man tactical team, extraction during daylight hours when the subjects were most active. The report noted that the adult positioned itself between capture team and juvenile, displaying protective behavior. It had tried to save its child. The juvenile had escaped into dense underbrush. The field team had attempted pursuit, but lost the trail within 40 minutes. Their final notation was clinical. Secondary target may not survive independently. Age estimated 4-6 years based on size and dentition. Recommendation: monitor area for signs of return to capture site. I sat back, the blue glow of the monitor washing over my face. They knew. Dr. Chen knew. The facility director knew. Everyone who signed off on this operation knew they had separated a juvenile from its parent, and they did it anyway. My phone buzzed. Shift reminder. 2200, 0600, D-Wing. I closed the files and left the library, my security badge suddenly feeling heavier than it should. That night I couldn't look at Specimen 7 the same way. It had returned to its corner position, but something was different. The creature seemed smaller somehow, despite its size, diminished. Its breathing was shallow, labored. The weight loss was visible now. ribs beginning to show beneath the auburn hair, muscle definition where there should have been mass. It was dying. Slowly, quietly, without violence or struggle. Just fading. Vitals are declining. Dr. Chen's voice came through the facility-wide channel at 0230. Respiratory rate elevated, core temperature down. Prepare for possible medical intervention. I watched the medical team arrive. Sterile suits, sedatives, crash cart. The creature didn't resist when they entered the containment room. It simply sat there, eyes half closed, as they ran IV lines and attached monitoring equipment. Doctor. Chen stood at the observation window beside me, her reflection ghostly in the glass. It's not a disease, I said quietly. She didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried an exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. No, it's not. The juvenile, I continued, from the capture report. You think it's still alive? Her jaw tightened. That's not our concern, Officer Webb. Our concern is the specimen in front of us. That's a parent in front of us, Doctor. She turned to face me, her eyes hard. I know what it is, and I know what happens if we don't produce results. This facility closes, the funding disappears, and everything we've learned, everything we could still learn, gets buried. And if it dies, then we perform a necropsy and salvage what data we can. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who had stopped sleeping soundly years ago. How do you do it? I asked. I remember that I'm a scientist, she said, and I don't let myself think about anything else. She left the observation station without another word. I stayed, watching the creature breathe, and made a decision that would end everything I'd built. The plan formed over the next 3 days, not all at once, but in pieces. Fragments of possibility stitched together during the long silence of graveyard shifts. I couldn't free it. The security protocols were absolute. Biometric locks, redundant systems, armed response teams on 15-minute standby. Even if I managed to bypass the containment room itself, we were 300 feet underground. The creature would never reach the surface alive, but I could do something else. I could give it a reason to survive. The realization came during my 4th consecutive shift, watching Specimen 7 refuse another meal. The medical interventions had stabilized its vitals temporarily, but the weight loss continued. It was starving itself, not from inability to eat, but from unwillingness to exist. I'd seen it before, in a different context. My brother Derek, after his divorce. The way he stopped taking care of himself, stopped engaging with the world. Not because he couldn't, but because the reason to try had been taken from him. What Specimen 7 needed wasn't nutrition, it was hope. I started researching juvenile hominid behavior, what legitimate literature existed, which was precious little. But the patterns were clear across species. Displaced juveniles return to familiar territory. They seek the safety of last known locations. They wait. If the juvenile was alive, it would return to the capture site. And if I could prove that, could show Specimen 7 that its child survived, maybe it would choose to live. The capture site was 40 miles northeast, accessible only by Forest Service roads that barely deserved the name. I had 4 days off starting Friday, 4 days to hike into some of the most remote wilderness in Washington state, locate evidence of a creature that science barely acknowledged, and somehow document it well enough to be convincing. It was insane. I started packing Thursday morning. The gear came from my own collection. Backpacking equipment, trail cameras, night vision optics. Nothing from the facility, nothing that could be traced. I filed my time-off request through normal channels, told my landlord I was visiting family in Portland, and disabled the GPS tracking on my phone. Friday at dawn, I drove east into the Cascades. The coordinates from the capture report led to a creek bed in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, miles past the last maintained trailhead. I hiked in with 60 pounds of equipment, following game trails and terrain features, reaching the location just before sunset. The shelter site was exactly where the field notes indicated, a natural overhang in a basalt formation, partially concealed by fallen timber. The interior showed clear signs of occupancy, arranged stones forming a sleeping platform, worn paths in the moss, marks on surrounding trees at exactly 8 feet high where bark had been stripped away. This was their home. I set up trail cameras in a perimeter pattern, positioning them to cover the approaches without being obvious. Then I did something that felt absurd and necessary in equal measure. I left food, berries, nuts, dried fruit, high-calorie items that wouldn't spoil quickly. And I waited. The first night, nothing. Just the sounds of the forest, wind through Douglas firs, the distant call of owls, my own breathing in the darkness. The second night, rain. I sat in my tent, monitoring the camera feeds on a tablet, watching nothing but weather blur the lenses. The third night, I almost gave up. My supplies were running low. My shift at the facility resumed in 36 hours. This was madness, desperation masquerading as a plan. At 0347, camera 4 triggered. I grabbed the tablet, my hands shaking. The footage was dark, infrared washed, grainy from distance. But there, moving through the frame with careful, deliberate steps, was a figure, small, juvenile, exactly 4 feet tall. It approached the food cache, paused, seemed to test the air. Then, with movements that mirrored the adult's heartbreaking caution, it gathered the offerings and retreated into the forest. I had my proof. The child was alive. I returned to the facility Sunday night with a USB drive in my pocket and a decision crystallizing in my chest. What I had was evidence. 17 seconds of trail camera footage, thermal imaging data, photographic proof that a juvenile hominid was surviving independently in the Gifford-Pinchot wilderness. For a cryptobiologist, it would be career-defining. For the facility, it would be justification for expanded operations. For Specimen 7, it could be everything. But first, I had to make someone care. Dr. Chen was in her lab when I arrived, hours before my shift. She looked up from her microscope with the weary suspicion of someone used to bad news at odd hours. "Officer Webb, you're early. I need to show you something," I said, connecting the USB drive to her workstation. "And I need you to watch it before you say anything." Her expression shifted from suspicion to concern. "If this is about your assignment, just watch, please." I played the footage. All 17 seconds. The small figure emerging from darkness, approaching the cache, gathering food with those 2 human hands, disappearing into forest that could swallow armies. The video ended. Dr. Chen sat motionless. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "The capture site 4 days ago. I set cameras in a perimeter pattern and waited." "You went back to an active field location during your personal time, without authorization, without a team?" She stood up, anger and something else, fear, flashing across her face. "Do you understand what you've done? If something had happened to you, if you'd been injured or—" "The juvenile is alive," I interrupted. "Specimen 7's offspring is alive and returning to their home territory. It's waiting for its parent." Dr. Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were bright with something between fury and anguish. "I know." The words hung in the sterile air. "You know? We've had reports from the field team. 3 separate sightings over the past 2 weeks. The juvenile is exhibiting stress behaviors, repeated returns to the capture site, vocalization patterns consistent with distress calls, decreased foraging efficiency." She turned away, gripping the edge of her desk. "It's dying too, Officer Webb, just slower." "Then let him go." The words came out harder than I intended. "You have your data. You have tissue samples, behavioral documentation, photographic evidence. You've proven they exist. Now let him return to his child." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." "No," she said sharply. "It's not. This facility operates on a 3-year funding cycle. We're 18 months into demonstrating viable containment and study protocols for unclassified cryptids. If we release Specimen 7 now, we lose everything. The funding, the research licenses, the political protection that keeps this work legal." She faced me again, and I saw the cost of her choices written in the lines around her eyes. 63 people work here, Officer Webb. Biologists, geneticists, conservationists. We're doing work that could rewrite our understanding of evolutionary biology. And yes, there are costs. There are always costs. The cost is a father watching his child starve while he dies in a box. The cost is the potential to save entire species from extinction, to understand ecological relationships we didn't know existed, to play God while pretending it's science. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of refrigeration units somewhere in the building's depths. Dr. Chen sat down slowly. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to remember why you became a biologist," I said quietly. "Before the grants, before the publications, before all this, what did you think you'd be doing?" She laughed, a broken sound. "Saving things, protecting them, making sure they'd still exist for my children's children to marvel at. Then help me save this one." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" She met my eyes. "I mean if I do this, My career ends. My reputation becomes a cautionary tale, and every piece of legitimate cryptozoological research gets set back a decade because the woman who released a specimen became the proof that we can't be trusted. I understood then. Not agreement, but understanding. She was trapped too, just in a different cage. My last shift began like any other. Badge scan, security check, descent into the fluorescent depths. But I carried something different that night. Not a weapon, not a plan for dramatic escape. Just a tablet with 17 seconds of footage and a choice. Specimen 7 was in critical condition. The medical team had been in twice during the day shift, administering fluids and nutrients intravenously. The creature tolerated their presence with the same resignation it had shown for everything. A living thing that had stopped fighting, because fighting required hope. I took my position at Security Station D7 at exactly 2200. At 22:15, I did something that violated every protocol I'd sworn to uphold. I activated the two-way audio system. "Hey," I said softly. "I need you to listen to me." The creature stirred slightly but didn't turn. "I know you can understand. Maybe not the words, but the intention. I know you're aware of more than they think you are." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I know you're dying, and I know why." Now it looked up, those dark eyes finding mine through the glass. "I went back," I continued. "To the place where they took you. I set up cameras. I waited." I held up the tablet, pressing it against the observation window. "And I found this." I played the video. 17 seconds. A small figure moving through darkness, gathering food, surviving. I played it again, and again. The creature rose, slowly, painfully, moving toward the glass. It pressed its face close to the barrier, eyes fixed on the small screen showing its child alive, alone, but alive. A sound emerged from its chest, not the grief from before, something different, a whimper of recognition, of desperate need to reach through the glass and distance, and impossibility to touch that small figure. "Your child is alive," I said, my own voice breaking. "They're waiting for you. They're returning to your home every night, calling for you." The creature's hand came up to the glass, fingers spreading wide over the image. "I can't free you," I admitted. "I don't have that power, but I need you to understand something. You have to survive. You have to eat. You have to stay strong, because someone out there needs you to come back." For a long moment we stayed like that, a human and a creature that shouldn't exist, separated by reinforced glass and impossible circumstances, connected by the shared understanding of what it means to be responsible for a life beyond your own. Then the creature did something I will remember until the day I die. It placed its other hand against the glass, directly over where my own hand rested on my side of the barrier, not separated now by species or captivity or fear, just two beings acknowledging each other across a divide that couldn't be crossed. I played the video one more time. This time the creature watched in complete stillness, and when it ended, it stepped back, turned to the feeding station it had ignored for weeks, and ate. I filed my resignation at 0600, effective immediately. Dr. Chen found me in the parking lot as dawn broke over the Cascades. She didn't ask why, didn't try to convince me to stay. She just handed me a folder. "Revised field protocols," she said quietly. "Effective next week. Specimen 7 is being transferred to a semi-wild enclosure in the Olympic Experimental State Forest. 20 acres, natural habitat, minimal human contact, and we're ceasing all capture operations in the Gifford-Pinchot area. The juvenile will find its parent eventually. Or the parent will find it. We're installing remote monitoring only, no intervention." She paused. "You were right, Officer Webb. Some things matter more than data." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "For what it's worth," she added, "you would have made a terrible scientist, but you're a good man." She walked back inside, leaving me in the parking lot with the sunrise and the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. I never went back to security work. The facility closed my file with the notation, "Voluntary resignation, personal reasons." The NDAs I signed remain in effect. The secrets I carry will die with me. That's the price of the knowledge I gained in those 3 years underground. The understanding that some truths are too fragile to expose. But I did go back to the forest. 3 months after my resignation, I hiked back to the creek bed in Gifford-Pinchot. The trail cameras were gone, removed by Dr. Chen's team as promised. But evidence remained. Fresh tracks near the shelter site, bark stripped from trees in a familiar pattern 8 feet up, and something new, smaller marks, roughly 4 feet high, alongside the larger ones. They had reunited. I sat by the creek for an hour that day, listening to water move over stones, watching light filter through Douglas fir canopy, understanding that I would never see them again. And that was right. That was how it should be. Some stories don't have neat endings. The facility still operates, though I hear their focus has shifted to conservation genetics and habitat protection. Dr. Chen published a paper on unconfirmed hominid populations in Pacific Northwest ecosystems, carefully worded, meticulously researched, revealing nothing and everything. Specimen 7 became subject GHFR 7 in the literature. Gifford Pinchot hominid, family reunification, subject 7. A footnote in cryptozoological research. A case study in ethical fieldwork. A reminder that discovery and exploitation are separated only by intention. I think about them sometimes. The parent and child moving through forests that remember when the world was younger, when humans hadn't yet mapped every shadow and named every mystery. I wonder if the juvenile remembers those weeks alone, calling into darkness for an answer that couldn't come. I wonder if the parent ever understood what I tried to do, or if it simply knew that one human among many chose differently. Mostly I think about that moment, hand against glass, two beings acknowledging each other across a barrier that couldn't be crossed, but somehow was. That recognition, that choice to see someone instead of something. I work now at a wildlife rehabilitation center in Olympia. The pay is terrible. The work is endless. I spend my days feeding orphaned fawns and treating injured raptors, and explaining to visitors why we can't keep the animals as pets. And sometimes late at night I tell people the truth disguised as a story, about a security officer who guarded something impossible, and learned that the greatest threat to wonder isn't disbelief, but certainty, that the most dangerous human impulse isn't curiosity, but the conviction that understanding requires possession. The forests of the Pacific Northwest stretch for thousands of miles, ancient and deep, holding secrets in the spaces between trees. There are sounds in that darkness, calls that might be owls or coyotes or something else entirely, tracks that appear and disappear, shadows that move with too much purpose to be bears. I don't go looking anymore. I've learned the difference between discovering and disturbing, between knowing and respecting, between the truth that illuminates and the truth that destroys. But on quiet nights, when fog settles over the Cascades and the world becomes soft and uncertain, I remember. I remember the sound of crying in a concrete room. I remember eyes that held understanding and grief. I remember 17 seconds of footage showing a small figure surviving against impossible odds, waiting for a parent who couldn't come. And I remember the moment I chose to believe that some secrets aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be protected. There are still places where the world resists in silence, and the true miracle is leaving them that way.